What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Going into holiday 2024, I don't think any of us really expected to still be talking about the last generation systems, but after an announcement yesterday, seems like we still have quite a ways to go with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. We'll go over that, though, here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Square Enix and their latest financial report that has people fairly mixed online, some very concerned about the path they've chosen with Sony and their PlayStation console, and others actually very hopeful for the future, especially when it comes to those big HD games, but we'll take a look at some of the information they put out there. And also, Sony Santa Monica, based on a new listing, seems like they might have a bit more in the oven than just another God of War game. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Xbox Game Pass games, specifically Wave 1 for the month of August. They post this up over on their website, news.xbox.com. We can start from the top with actually a game out today, August 7th, and that's Creatures of Ava. Either way, cloud, PC, and Xbox Series X and S. This is a day one release into the service, so good stuff there. Then we have Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. They are now tapping into that Activision library, as they've mentioned before. Cloud, console, and PC. That'll go live tomorrow, August 8th. And then moving up to August 13th, Mafia Definitive Edition, cloud, console, and PC. That's kind of it right now, though. Just those three releases, and I mean, it's not a bad way to kick off the month of August here, but it does kind of feel light, I guess. I mean, look, Mafia Definitive Edition, I really like. This is an older title, and of course, Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, same deal there. Creatures of Ava isn't exactly one that's jumping off the page, but still, this is just sort of wave one. Keep in mind, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is in the service with console and PC, and with Valorant, you can just apparently unlock the different characters that are available there to use, so that's kind of cool as well. But we'll see. Again, this is wave one for the month of August. They should have a bunch of other announcements happening here in the coming weeks. Also, we do have Black Myth Wukong coming out here in about 2 weeks, and it looks like the game has gone gold, which you would kind of expect considering it is out here pretty soon, but they did post this up over on their official account, where they say, "Dear Destined Ones, thank you for your patience. We're thrilled to announce that the full development of Black Myth Wukong is complete and the game will be released as scheduled." Again, that is on the PlayStation 5, Steam, Epic Game Store, and they also say Wii game, but it is releasing August 20th. And for a while, this was, I mean, it was really, really cool when they first showed it, then it was sort of off my radar for a while, and recently it's kind of jumped back on my radar, and I am looking forward to this one. I'm interested because originally I thought it was going to be a Souls game, and now they're saying it's not necessarily like a one-to-one Souls game, so I'm curious what their take is here, more on like the action adventure, I guess, style games. So that's the thing, I'm going into it not necessarily 100% sure what I'm getting into, and actually in a way that's a bit more interesting for me, but I will be picking it up August 20th, and I'm sure we'll talk about it on one of the podcasts, or who knows, maybe I'll make a video of like my first impressions of it as I play the first hour or two. Oh, and here's something interesting to keep an eye on going into Tokyo Game Show next month. As we know, SEGA and RGG, they did tell us that there is a new project in the Yakuza franchise that should surprise people. Well, we can see this is actually posted up over on Gamatsu, as they noticed a new trademark that Sega's filed called Yakuza Wars. Now, the franchise, yes, is called Like a Dragon, but obviously we've known it as Yakuza for so long, but still, Yakuza Wars, okay, though that was filed on July 26th. Again, this ahead of Tokyo Game Show, where we're expecting something, and they say it's going to surprise long-running fans of the series. And this to me sounds like a spin-off game, but I also want to point out it's very possible it could be a mobile phone game. I always put that out there just to temper some expectations, but it doesn't necessarily seem like a good idea to hype something like that up, and they kind of have already started the hype cycle here. So I'm hoping that this is more maybe just a spin-off of some kind for consoles, but I guess we'll find out towards the end of September with Tokyo Game Show. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One that are somehow still going strong nearly 4 years into the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series generation. And in fact, we had an announcement for a PS5 and Xbox Series game that was going to be moved to the PS4 and the Xbox One, so backported, and this was from EA. Now, they told us about this actually earlier this year, and it kind of went a bit under the radar because it was on an investor's call. However, they made it official with a release date, and that just sparked the whole conversation again of, why are games still coming out for the PS4 and the Xbox One? Well, we can see this announcement over on their official account. This is on the EA Star Wars account, saying the critically acclaimed Star Wars Jedi Survivor is coming to Xbox One and PlayStation 4 on September 17th. Okay, so next month, like 6 weeks or so from now, this will be releasing. I believe it's coming out at a price of $49.99, so not looking for like the full $70 or even $60 in this case. They have links to both the Xbox and PlayStation listings for it, and people are trying to figure out, okay, how is this thing going to run? Because we saw it struggle a lot on the PS5 and the Xbox Series when it first came out. They have since done a bunch of patches, and it does run better on those systems. Still struggles, though, on PC. Now, people have pointed out that there appears to be some sort of patch that's been in the works for a while based on different database updates for the PC version of Jedi Survivor. So maybe there is an update here coming soon as well, maybe to go alongside of this version releasing. But still, it is going to be very interesting to see how this plays on, specifically for me, the VCR Xbox One, because that would be technically the weakest. I know you also have the Xbox One S, but they did add like HDR and other things. Like that is the VCR is the base Xbox One from 2013. The PS4 more capable, but that'll also be an interesting version to see how it turns out, and really how, I guess, just Respawn is able to come up with little tricks here and there to make it work, and that could actually be an interesting case study, which I'm sure Digital Foundry will cover completely. But as I mentioned, this brought up the conversation around the PS4 and the Xbox One still getting what you would look at as major releases. This game came out last year. Okay, so last year, about a year and a half actually ago, and it's now coming out on the PS4 and the Xbox One. And I looked at some of the releases coming up throughout the rest of 2024, and most likely, because not every game is going to make it this year, will be pushed to next year into 2025. And yes, the Xbox One and the PS4 logo and name is still popping up next to many of these titles, which means we're most likely going to end up in 2025, halfway through, maybe even holiday 2025, and still getting maybe even mid-tier releases for systems from 2013. And I think that really just shows, yes, the player base that still exists, specifically on the PS4, but I guess kind of on the Xbox One, but also just the architecture being very, very similar, the pipeline between the two not being that different, the fact that Microsoft and Sony themselves even are still kind of holding up those older systems and even sharing data showing that half of PlayStation users online are still using the PlayStation 4 in some capacity. These third parties are going to really try to get as much money as they can from that older system for as long as possible. I do think having something like the PlayStation 5 Pro, however, might make it a little more difficult, because now you're going to have a bunch of different SKUs that you have to develop for and keep in mind, because then you'd have the base PS4, the PS4 Pro, the PS5, and then the PS5 Pro. That's 4 of them. I guess for the Xbox, you still have Xbox One, Xbox One X, Xbox Series S, and Xbox Series X. And then if they end up in the next generation in like end of 2026, 2027, you start adding those into the mix. I don't know if the Xbox One and the PS4 will get that far, but it does appear yes, they are going to make it into 2025. They're going to make it at minimum 4 years into the PS5 and Xbox Series generation. I think when these systems first came out, no one was expecting it. I will say, though, as we had the conversation more and more over the last year or so, RGT did mention he thought these systems would end up in 2025 with new releases, and it looks like he's going to be right about that one. But let me know if you still are using your PlayStation 4 or your Xbox One, even the upgraded One X and PS4 Pro models, and why you haven't necessarily jumped to an Xbox Series or a PS5 yet. Next up, let's talk about EA and Madden. So the NFL license, of course, is with EA. They struck a deal, and it's been like 20 years, Madden 2005 and NFL 2K5 were the last time we had two different like mainstream NFL games with the current day players. And ever since then, it's just been Madden the whole way. You still have like All Pro Football 2K8, but that was using the legends and not current NFL players. But still, it does appear that that deal is once again up for negotiation, and it appears that EA is not at all concerned about losing it. We can actually see this posted up. This is an exclusive by Insider Gaming. where they say sources have indicated to Insider Gaming that discussions between EA and the NFL have been ongoing regarding the future of the game and the license. It's said that talks began later than in the past for a variety of reasons, including concern from the league if remaining exclusive with one company was the best option. The league has been well aware of the public reception to the franchise the past few years, and one thing they don't like is when the Shield is viewed in any sort of negative light. That meant there was added pressure from not only within EA to deliver, but from the NFL as well. As far as the possibility of losing the exclusive rights to allow more simulation games from competitors, I was told it's not impossible, but there's honestly no way someone else could compete with us for the rest of this generation and possibly in the next one due to the timing of the deal and how long it takes to make a game like this. We're not worried, and that is something that I think people tend to forget about. It does take a long time to develop games now, and if all of a sudden the NFL decided to start looking around outside of EA, even if they struck a deal, say, with 2K, and that's the other publisher company that most people would say, okay, the NFL would go there to create a competing product to Madden, it would take them like 4 or 5 years minimum to make a new football game, and we already know the first couple of iterations probably aren't going to be the greatest in terms of just technical side of things, so that would take a little while. We'd probably be 7 or 8 years in before they had like a competent game that was able to compete with Madden, which sounds really sad because Madden isn't exactly at a high point right now. The thing I would hope might add some more pressure to the development side of Madden is the fact that college football has been so well received, and you feel like internally at EA you'd have some competition between the two development studios who are working on those different games to maybe make a better game. At least that's kind of how it was back in the day when we had NCAA football and then Madden, and yes, they were compatible, and sure, it was still EA, but you had some pride within EA as working at these different studios trying to create the best football game coming out of that company. Maybe that's what we need, is that competition once again every single year between studios within EA, because again, even if 2K managed to get a deal in place or the NFL just opened it up completely, we probably wouldn't be talking about another competent game that could compete with Madden till probably midway through the PlayStation 6 generation. Next up, let's talk about Square Enix and their recent financial report. This will be their Q1 for the fiscal year that covers April, May, and June. If you remember, last year in this same quarter, they did have Final Fantasy 16, which did sell well enough, again, being just on the PlayStation 5. Still, though, some of the numbers now are a bit mixed from Square Enix, which we can actually see this posted up by Genki, who did a very good summarization of that, and we can put it right up here on screen easily, where we have net sales are down 18.4%. However, operating income is up 250%. Now, they do mention that HD Games net sales were down due to decline in sales of new titles compared to last year, which had Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy Pixel Remastered, but HD Games turned profitable due to lower development and advertising costs. I think that's very important since with Final Fantasy 16, while they did sell millions of copies, sure, they had mentioned like 3 million or so copies very, very quickly, they still have to advertise and develop the game, and a lot of that cost is tacked on, and that's why when you see this quarter versus last, operating income being higher despite net sales being lower. But here's the part that both concerned people and also gave people hope, which sounds weird, but stick with me for a second. That's Daniel Ahmed, who went through some of the numbers here, saying that their main takeaway from the report is that the only reason Square Enix's digital entertainment business is profitable right now is because of its MMO and mobile titles. 68.4% of operating profit from MMO games, 31.1% from mobile games, 0.5% from non-MMO PC and console games, which would include obviously Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy 16 leading the way there. And again, a lot of concerns around that considering, well, they're locked away to the PS5 right now, but we should see a PC version coming pretty soon for at least Final Fantasy 16, considering there was a game-ready driver update for NVIDIA, and over on Reddit, a person was going through it and noticed that Final Fantasy 16 is part of that most recent driver, so seems like NVIDIA themselves even prepping for an announcement and then subsequent release here pretty soon. So good news on that one, as 16, I think will have a nice little jump in sales once it shows up on something like Steam. But if you look at the games coming up here for for Square Enix, as they outlined here, page 10 of their slides for investors. They have Visions of Mana, they have Romancing Saga 2, Life is Strange Double Exposure, Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D, and then Fantasia Neo Dimension. So nothing that's gonna all of a sudden explode to 10 million copies sold, but not like a terrible lineup necessarily, especially when you go from Visions of Mana to Dragon Quest 3, and then hopefully Fantasia that makes it in this year. But this is all still part of Square Enix's their restructuring they're doing behind the scenes. They've already made this announcement and basically said, hey, it's going to be a little while before we get to that point where we have major games releasing that are going to hopefully sell 10 million plus copies. That seems to be their real goal right now, is having fewer titles released, but them all be big releases, ones that do have people paying attention to Square Enix, as opposed to having a bunch of smaller games that you kind of just jam into a quarter and hope for the best. They've tried that before. It just didn't work out. So I guess the hopeful part here is, okay, well, only 0.5% from like these HD games is what contributed, whereas their MMO seems to be very healthy right now with Final Fantasy XIV. Keep in mind, their Dawn Trail expansion is not included in this report, as that came out the first week of July. That's not part of this report since that cuts off June 30th. And they also mentioned like Dragon Quest X got an update and that, but it seems like MMO and their mobile phone games are doing well and actually are very profitable. So if they can get these big HD releases figured out, Square Enix can actually be a very profitable and healthy company. So I think the restructuring they've announced is actually a good strategy. The only issue is it's going to take a little while, like years and years probably, to get back on the right track, but I'm hoping they have a very similar resurgence as Capcom, who was in some dire straits at one point, got Monster Hunter World out there. That was a big success. Then we saw what they did with some of their other releases for the remakes with Resident Evil and changed around some of their franchise there with some of the releases with Resident Evil 7 and then Village, and the rest is history. So that's kind of the resurgence I would like to see from Square Enix, and I guess we'll find out throughout the rest of this generation and to start up the next one. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Sony Santa Monica, who with their last release being God of War Ragnarok, if you played it, kind of sets up the idea of there being another God of War game. Would it be a smaller title or the next big one? Hard to say. Again, it depends on which path they decide to take from the end of that game. But still, that's kind of the expectation. At least until a certain LinkedIn post popped up, which we can actually see this is posted. This is over on VGC. According to LinkedIn profile of a developer who rejoined the Sony studio, that being Sony Santa Monica, earlier this year to oversee character development on the unannounced project, saying, quote, Sony Santa Monica Studios presented the opportunity of coming back as character supervisor, looking after the entire character development pipeline on their new IP. So here I am, thrilled to be back, working again with the crew and pushing characters in video games together. To me, this is very exciting. I like the idea here of Sony Santa Monica after God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok to now move over to something that's not God of War, something brand new, and just take a swing, see what you can come up with, because clearly a lot of talent at that studio. Go figure. What can they do outside of God of War? Because they can still have a smaller studio, like a smaller portion of their studio, I should say, and then maybe also collaborate with one of the Sony support studios to work on a God of War game that's centered around Atreus and sort of his adventures after Ragnarok or whatever. Like, they could play around with that, sure. But the idea of them having God of War, like the main line, the big God of War game, maybe go on the shelf until their next system even, so like the PlayStation 6, I think that's actually a good idea. And now they can kind of venture out and try something new. And who knows, maybe they come up with something awesome that they can actually continue on from there, similar to what they have with God of War. So this actually gets me a bit more excited for whenever a PlayStation showcase does happen, if that Sony Santa Monica logo pops up, just so they can at least tell us what exactly they have going. Although, I guess you see this LinkedIn description and you go, well, okay, it's probably going to be quite a while before we see that logo pop up, but who knows? Maybe they want to show us even years in advance, because Sony certainly due for that showcase where they can start telling us about the second half of their PlayStation 5 lineup. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played Final Fantasy 16? 69%, because everyone says no. 31% say yes. So there's still many people out there who have not played this game. I know there was a lot of controversy around them kind of exiting the idea of a menu-based or turn-based RPG. Well, they kind of left that behind with Final Fantasy 15, but I am playing back through 16 on Final Fantasy mode, and mostly because I want to do the DLC, and I forgot that I started up New Game Plus on Final Fantasy mode, so I have to play through the game all over again, but I did want to also get the ultimate weapon and max out different things and then do the DLC, so that's fine. But I am really enjoying my second playthrough of it, and it's been long enough to where I'm not experiencing it the first time, but it has more impact than if I went right back through it again. And I think it's actually an awesome game, and I do recommend more people checking it out, especially if you can get it on sale for like $30 or less on the PlayStation 5, or who knows, that PC release, that is going to be, I think, a very impressive looking game, and I almost want to grab it there just to see it cruising along, maybe at like 120 plus frames per second with high details, DLSS, ray tracing, the whole thing, because the game already looks good on the PS5. It could definitely go next level on a PC with a good video card. So here's hoping we get that PC announcement here soon, because I do think that's certainly will be spiking sales for Final Fantasy 16. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Shinobi, who says, the real question is, would a Half-Life 3 announcement would break the internet harder than GTA 6? I think in some circles, Half-Life 3 would break the internet more than GTA 6. Mainstream-wise, probably not. Just many people have, I'm sure, not played Half-Life 2. Remember, that came out what feels like forever ago, like almost 20 years ago or something? It's been so long since that, it has been, yeah, more than 20 years. It's been so long since that game came out. And while they have had updates and different iterations from mods and again, ray tracing, and it's been cheap as anything on PC, you still would be playing it mostly there, right? Like, you're not going to get the original Xbox version. Even Orange Box is harder to find, we'll say, on the 360. So I still think GTA 6 is that game that's going to be unmatched by any other franchise, right? Whenever a trailer drops GTA 6, we're on the watch for 100 million plus views on that trailer, potentially within its first, 48 hours or so. It's gonna be pretty wild. Whereas Half-Life 3, it'd be a lot of fun to some of the people who are really plugged in, but then the mainstream will see it and just be like, I don't know what that is. So again, the generations cycle through, and when you realize Half-Life 2 is 20 years old, they got some catching up to do for that one. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below, but everything we talked about here today was the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One still going strong, seems, in 2024. How many more years do you think that last generation has left in it? And then also, what about Square Enix with some of their financials they posted up and maybe the path forward for them? And what about Sony Santa Monica? Do you like the idea of them trying maybe a brand new intellectual property, or would you rather them stick to the story of Kratos and God of War? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.